We are in open session, Mr. President.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Witness, you had told us in private session before the morning break that as a result of certain noise that you heard, you had left your home and proceeded to the police post approximately 2 days after the election results. Now, my question is, can you please describe for the Chamber what it is, describe the events which led to your proceeding to the police post?
Jambo ambayo nilifanya niende police post kama vile
The reasons for which I went to the police post are the same as what I told you before, namely that people were screaming and that there were problems in Turbo Town. You see, when the election results were announced, people started fleeing and houses were burned down. From my window, I felt that things were no longer secure, and for that reason, I went to seek refuge at the police station or the police post.
And were there any incidents that you experienced after the elections that led to your going to the police post?
Tafadhali naomba ufafanue kidogo saa sijakuelewa hapo.
Please kindly elaborate on your question. I'm not sure I understood it.
All right. You've mentioned that you heard people making noise and that there were problems in Turbo Town. And I believe you said that there were houses that were burnt down. And my question is, did anything happen to you prior to your going to the police station? I beg your pardon, the police post.
Kama nilivyosema awali, kulikuwa hakuna amani. Na
as I told you before, there was insecurity, and for that reason I was forced to take my children to go seek refuge at the police post. Under those circumstances, no one was able to provide security for us, and I took the personal decision to go to the police post.
All right. You mentioned that there were houses that were burnt. Who is burning houses?
sifahamu sababu wakati
I do not know. When the burning of houses started, I was not nearby. I was some 2 kilometers away from Turbo Town. And there is a wood or a forest between my location and Turbo Town. So I was able to see, however, from a distance that some smoke was rising, and that is why I was able to determine that some houses had been burnt.
And you mentioned that people were making a lot of noise. Who was making a lot of noise?
Ungeweza kuelewa sababu nduru ilikuwa ni kila mahali. Wenye walikuwa kwa
It was difficult to know who was making those noises. There was screaming everywhere. There were people on the roads shouting. People were screaming in Turbo Town. People were screaming all over, following what had just been said.
I think before the interpretation cut in, I heard you use the word induru. Did you use that word?
yeah, nilitumia nduru.
Yes, I used the word nduru.
And what does that mean, induru?
Inamaanisha kelele inapigwa ni mfano wa kelele.
Nduru is screams that are uttered when someone feels that they are in danger.
And are you able to tell the chamber the ethnicity of the people that were screaming?
Sijui na siwezi kutofautisha nduru ya.
I am not able to tell you, and I am not able to tell you the difference between the types of screams or screaming uttered by various tribes. There are no specific words that are used, but you can hear the yelling or the screaming, and therefore it is difficult to distinguish what type of screaming it was. But you might be able to determine who was chasing after whom and who was fleeing.
Are you able to say who was chasing after who and who was fleeing at that time?
Hapana.
No.
Let me ask you this then. After the announcement of the PNU candidate, Mr. Kibaki, as the winner of the presidential election, what was the atmosphere like among the Kalenjin community in the Turbo area?
We are in open session, Mr. President.
You just told the chamber that after the announcement of the election results, Kikuyu in your area went to the IDP camp, the refugee camp, left Turbo and went to the refugee camp. My question is, why did they go to the refugee camp?
Sikuelewa ni kwa nini.
Answer: I didn't understand why they went there.
Right. Let me ask you another question. After the announcement of the election results, what was the relationship like between ODM supporters and PNU supporters?
Baada ya kutangazwa kwa uchaguzi.
Answer. After the results were announced, you see, I really no longer know why the PNU supporters went to the IDP camp. Some houses had been torched. You could see smoke from far away. And what I do remember is that we went to the police posts and there was no one who could help.
So, are you telling me that you don't know how the ODM supporters felt about PNU supporters after the election results? Do I understand you correctly?
Unajua, naweza sema.
Answer. Well, I can't explain what I mean. It wasn't the first time that such a conflict occurred. In my opinion, these disturbances had caused a climate of uncertainty amongst the various communities, the ethnic communities. Some people went to the IDP camp, others stayed where they were. Some people went and burnt down houses. And when they did that, there were no people in the houses because the owners of those houses had already left and gone.
We are in open session, Mr. President.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honours. Mr. Witness, just one point of clarification. You mentioned before the morning break, when I was asking you about a person named Mr. Farouk Kibet, that he lived far away. Do you know where Mr. Farouk Kibet lived? In what area?
Ya, najua mahali kwa
Answer. Yes. I know where he came from, but I don't see that place on the PIS form.
That's all right. You can tell us where that place was.
Chepsaita.
Answer. Chepsaita.
Please spell that for the record.
CHE P CHEP SAITA.
Thank you. And have you ever been to Mr. Kibet's house in Chepsaita?
Hapana.
Or no.
And do you know where Mr. William Ruto's house was in that area?
Ndio naijua.
Answer yes.
Tell us where that is, please.
Kosa je.
Answer Kosaye.
Spell again, please.
K-O. S-A-C-H-E-I.
And have you ever been to that house, sir?
Samani. Ni samani sana.
Answer, I beg your pardon.
Have you ever been to Mr. Ruto's house in the area you've just mentioned, particularly in 2007?
Hapana.
No.
All right. To move on then. Now, you've told the court that at the time of the elections and the following violence, you were staying at location number 3. And I'd like to return then to your meeting with the investigators in November 2012, I beg your pardon. My question is, did you ever tell the investigators that you were staying at a different location in 2007?
Rudia tena, sijakuelewa.
Answer, repeat your question. I haven't understood.
When you met the investigators in November 2012, did you tell them that you were living in location number 3 in 2007? Or did you tell them that you were living in a different location?
Hapana.
Answer, no.
So, if we were to look at your statement, Mr. Witness, would it reflect that at the time of the elections in 2007, you were staying in location number 3?
Ndio.
Answer, yes.
Can we then have a look at your statement to confirm that? And I asked the court officer to please provide, if he hasn't already got it, the witness.
I'm not sure of the process, actually, that we're entering into at this point. It's not a reminding, it seems, exercise. It's a plain cross-examination exercise.
Is that an objection?
Sorry, yes, and that's an objection. I saw it actually round up.
Objection is sustained.
Your Honours, there are matters that the witness has testified to there are matters that the witness has testified to which do not correspond with the version I have. We've not reached the stage yet of making an application in the nature of the witnesses that have preceded this. But I would like at this stage to point out certain discrepancies and ask the witness to comment on them without cross-examining the witness on the content.
The point being made by the objection was, if you do not want to, you either cross-examining the witness or you are refreshing their memory. If you're not cross-examining at this stage, which involves pointing out previous inconsistent statement, it needs to be refreshing the memory. In which case, that needs to be established that that is what is going on.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Witness. You've told the court that as you sit there today, you say that you told the investigators in 2012 that you had been staying in location number 3 during the 2007 election period.
Well, is this really a fair way to approach the difficulty? It's hardly a memory refreshing exercise if you ask someone where they were living and they give a clear and plain answer, as this witness has in his testimony, as to where he was living, and then to put to him a question relating to what he said or might have said or thought he'd said or understood that he'd said to investigators 2 years ago. Again, this is not a memory refreshing exercise, truly. His evidence has been plain.
Is it really that plain, Mr. Hooper? If you remember now, interpretation has got into it. It's got in the middle, and that makes it difficult to assert plainness of question and answer with great authority. And beyond that, it's a question I'm looking for, where if you look at page 41, for example, beginning at line 9, and the answer that came, you may see what I'm talking about. The question at line 9 at page 41. When you met the investigators in November 2012, did you tell them that you were living in location number 3 in 2007, or did you tell them that you were living in a different location? The answer is no. So what is the plain proposition there?
Well, you're asking someone with his attendant difficulties in language and the like to reflect on what he said or might have said 2 years ago. I'd submit it's a rather artificial approach. I'm not going to conduct my friend's examination in chief for him, but would a more straightforward question be, did you ever live at? For a start. And progress from there.
Let us do this. Mr. Steinberg, in view of the difficulties we've seen, or we've experienced, we have experienced that with interpretation, and I say let's be careful. let's try and explore whether there is certainty in the answer to that question, or whether it's a matter of somebody not remembering something, rather than state it as a direct proposition either from your end or from Mr. Hooper said, that the witness has said this clearly or hadn't said that clearly. Let's try and establish what's going on.
Can I just emphasise also, there's no interpreter present at this interview. The gap for interpreter just has an NA, not applicable. There's no interpreter provided in the course of this interview. And when he comes back and he signs something, he's signing not something in Swahili, he's signing something in English.
What's the point?
Well, that given the difficulties that we've already met with this witness, quite plainly, and honestly presented difficulties on the part of the witness in my submission, he is disadvantaged, and it would be inappropriate, perhaps, from a friend to necessarily approach this matter perhaps in the same way as he might with someone who is not so disadvantaged. I don't know why they didn't have an interpreter for the interview, and particularly when it came to reading it and going over it.
Mr. Hooper, let's 1 second. Of course, this is a matter that's best, I emphasize the word best, taken up in submissions, but, can I say it best, but we also need to be aware of certain matters as well, so that when observations like that are made, to take that into account, and also look at page 23 of the witness statement, the acknowledgement that appears there. Not sure what it is saying about language, or not saying. I'll leave it at that. I say no more.
Well, Your Honours, the witness is obviously free to raise issues like my learned friend has raised if he feels necessary when we get to that stage. But for the prosecution side, if an interpreter wasn't used, my submission is that because it is because the witness didn't need one, or said he didn't need one. But that is perhaps a matter which we can argue. But the point that I'm exploring here is not so much where the witness now says he lived at the relevant time, but what I want to know is what did he tell the investigators, and I submit that that is a relevant aspect for the prosecution to explore.
Proceed then, proceed.
I'll first confirm that, and then if necessary we will go to the second stage. Now, Mr. Witness, when you met the investigators in November 2012, did you tell them that you lived at location number 3 in 2007?
Tulipokutana na wapelelezi niliambia hawa nakaa katika location namba 1.
I told them that I lived at location number 1.
Right. And when you told them that you lived at location number 1 in 2007, was that true or was that not true?
Haikuwa sahihi.
From the Swahili booth, could the witness be asked to kindly repeat his answer?
Please, can you repeat the answer, Mr. Witness?
Haikukuwa sahihi.
It was not correct.
And why did you tell an untruth to the investigators about where you were living in 2007?
Unajua wakati nilikuwa naenda kuandika statement.
Well, you know, when I went to make the statement, someone asked me to say what I had to say in my statement.
Without mentioning the name at this stage, the someone you were speaking of who told you what to say in your statement, was that a member of the prosecution, or was that a private individual?
Alikuwa anatoka sehemu mahali ingine.
It was a third party who was not of the prosecutor's office.
Was that third party present when you made your statement?
Hapana.
No.
Your Honor, I'd just like to ask for the name, if we can go into private session just for one moment to ask that, and then we can come back immediately.
Private session.
Mr. President, ninaomba.
We are in open session, Mr. President.
Witness, we're back in open session, and what you did with that last answer was a good way to do it. So if, when we're in public session, if the information that is required in your answer, that information appears in the PIS in front of you, then you refer to the information by the number. That was a good thing you did. Mr. Steinberg, proceed, please.
Thank you. Mr. Witness, so you were just at the point of telling the chamber that prior to giving your statement, I understand, you had been told what to say in your statement by persons number 1 and number 3 on the protected information sheet. Please explain to us how that happened.
Maneno yalitoka kwa mtu namba 3. Ikakuja.
All this started with person number 3, who told person number 1 that there were some people who were sort of wanted or being searched for. Person number 1 told me about it, and we went to talk to number 3 about this issue, and they explained to me what it was all about. So I was misled, and I agreed to make the statement accordingly.
And who is it that was looking for people, as you've just described?
hawako kwa hii majina ya persons. Sasa sijui.
The names of those persons do not appear on the list. With your leave, I may be able to answer that question, Mr. President.
Well, let me just ask you this. Were these private individuals or they individuals working for any particular organization?
Mr. President, hapo ni inataka ni explain.
Mr. President, in order to answer this question, I need to provide further explanations by providing the names of those persons and providing the circumstances or further details on the circumstances in which I made the statement. It was a rather lengthy process that led to that statement being given as such.
We will go into private session and take the witness's answer to that question in private session. Then